morning, grade 11s. This is trial 2, as I tried to swap over from a PowerPoint to an animation and it didn't work. So now we're going to try again. Okay, right, so going. Mainly today I'm going to do revision on how the nephron works and how osmoregulation occurs. So just briefly, quickly, the 3 different stages of how a nephron works are ultrafiltration, also known as glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion. So remember ultrafiltration, because of the pressure in the glomerulus, molecules that are small enough pass from the blood in the glomerulus into the space of Bowman's capsule and become what is called filtrate. Now, you will see that the animation that I hopefully am able to show you this time round, if I click the correct buttons, they give you a different word for it as soon as the filtrate goes into the tubule, the rest of the tubule. I'm 100% happy, and so is Mrs. Forenza, that you keep calling it filtrate right until here when it obviously is urine. Okay, so that is ultrafiltration or glomerular filtration, and it's small molecules. So molecules such as water, urea, amino acids, glucose, a whole lot of ions, etc. Okay. Remember that a lot of those molecules are actually still useful for the body, and therefore, especially in the proximal convoluted tubule, the process of tubular reabsorption is important. That means that the useful molecules are moved from the filtrate into the blood. They actually go from the filtrate into the tissue fluid, also known as interstitial fluid, between the cells, and then into the blood. There are a number of different processes by which those molecules move across. These include osmosis and diffusion and active absorption. You don't have to know that. You don't have to know which molecules move by which process and how the processes occur. The only thing you would need to know is that active absorption requires a lot of energy, and that's the reason why there are many mitochondria in the cells of the proximal convoluted tubule, to provide the energy for the active absorption of certain of those molecules through the walls of the tubule and then back into the blood supply. In a healthy individual, remember, all of the amino acids and all of the glucose would be reabsorbed, so that in this liquid coming down in the loop of Henle, there shouldn't be any glucose or any amino acids left. Okay. Then the loop of Henle. Okay, the loop of Henle is, its main function is to ensure that, and I'm looking down in the lower left here, sodium ions and chloride ions are moved from the loop of Henle into the tissue fluid or the interstitial fluid of the cells or the tissues of the medulla. And the purpose of that is to ensure that there's an extremely high salt concentration in this liquid that surrounds the tubule. And that's terribly important for water passing out. Now, in the animation, you will see that they talk, there's a little bit of detailed stuff that you don't have to know, and they talk about something called a countercurrent. And they describe how the salt concentration in the interstitial fluid increases as you pass deeper into the medulla. So although there's a lot of salt here, there's even more salt at the bottom here, and the concentration increases. Don't obsess about that. So a certain amount of water will also move from the loop of Henle into the surrounding tissues and then into the peritubular capillary network. There's no regulation. The body is unable to regulate how much water is reabsorbed there. Okay. Then the main part of osmoregulation occurs in the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. So remember that the walls of the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct have little pores or channels. I don't mind what you call them. And those little channels are able to open or close. If the body has ADH circulating in the blood supply, antidiuretic hormone, then those channels open, and when those channels open, water will pass from the liquid, the filtrate that is in the tubule of the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. Water will pass through the open channels from the tubule into the interstitial fluid, because remember, lots of salt in the fluid, so water will move out by osmosis, okay, and then go back into the peritubular capillary network. And that happens in the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. That means that if water has been reabsorbed from the filtrate, then the urine is very concentrated and it's dark in color and there's not much urine, and so the body has conserved water. Conversely, if the body has a high water level in the blood, and that is sensed by the hypothalamus in the brain, then no ADH is released from the pituitary gland, and the channels in the walls of the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct close. That means no water is reabsorbed in this region. The urine is very dilute, and there would be large volumes of dilute urine excreted. Okay, so this process that I've just described is called osmoregulation, and the body is able to regulate that. The body isn't able to regulate what happens, how much water is reabsorbed in the loop of Henle or even in the proximal convoluted tubule, but it is able to regulate this, and this is terribly important. Okay, two things that I need to go back to. The first is tubular secretion, and tubular secretion, mainly in the proximal convoluted tubule, refers to the fact that there are certain molecules that are big and therefore did not filter out in ultrafiltration, but remained in the blood, but they're toxic to the body. And examples would be drugs. And those toxic substances in the peritubular capillary network will be pushed from the blood in the peritubular capillary network into the tubules, from the blood into the tubules. So tubular secretion. The second thing that I need to go back to is the fact that, especially in the distal convoluted tubule, the body regulates the pH of the blood. So what happens is, if the pH of the blood is too low, in other words, it's too acidic, then certain ions, and those of you who do science will know that it's hydrogen ions, are pushed from the blood into the tubule, and therefore the pH is raised and those hydrogen ions are excreted in the urine. And less of that happens if the blood is not acidic enough. Okay, all right. So now I'm going to try and get you onto this animation. It didn't work last time. Let's try again and see if we can get it to work this time. Okay, got this. Now I need to click the share screen. I think that's what I didn't do last time. starting again. Okay, listen carefully.
The primary functions of the kidneys are to filter blood and form urine. In doing so, the kidneys regulate fluid balance, electrolyte concentration, and pH by excreting unwanted fluid and substances as urine. Urine is formed in the nephron. 3 processes are involved in urine formation: glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion. Glomerular filtration occurs as blood circulates through the glomerulus. Fluid, small molecules, and ions in the blood within glomerular capillaries move across the filtration membrane into the capsular space to form filtrate. Once filtrate enters the renal tubule, it is called tubular fluid. Substances are simultaneously removed from and added to the tubular fluid as it flows through the renal tubule. In tubular reabsorption, useful substances are removed from the tubular fluid and returned to the blood. Solutes move across the tubule wall into the interstitial fluid by processes such as diffusion, facilitated diffusion, active transport, co-transport, and osmosis. The solutes readily enter the surrounding capillaries to return to the general circulation. Water follows the solutes by osmosis. 65% of the water is reabsorbed from the proximal convoluted tubule, an additional 15% from the descending portion of the nephron loop, and an additional 19% from the distal convoluted tubule and collecting ducts. Thus, 99% of the glomerular filtrate ultimately returns to the bloodstream. The 1% or less that is not reabsorbed will be excreted as urine. In tubular secretion, substances move from the capillary blood to the tubular fluid. Waste materials, such as metabolic byproducts, excess ions, and drugs, diffuse out of the blood to the interstitial fluid and are then transported across the tubular wall and secreted into the tubular fluid for excretion. Tubular fluid that enters collecting ducts is called urine. Depending on the need to eliminate or conserve water, collecting ducts reabsorb water to produce dilute or concentrated urine. For example, when water intake is high, the kidneys produce a large volume of dilute urine. Conversely, when water intake is limited, producing a large volume of dilute urine would lead to dehydration. In this case, the kidneys conserve water by producing a small volume of concentrated urine. The kidney's ability to concentrate urine depends primarily on 2 key factors. 1, maintaining a high concentration of the solutes sodium chloride and urea in the renal medulla, which is accomplished by the countercurrent functions of the nephron loops. And 2, the presence of antidiuretic hormone, ADH, which makes collecting ducts more permeable to water.
Right. Okay, right. So that's all I wanted to do today, was just to make sure that you understood this and to show you that animation. Remember, you must, it's more than you are welcome to. You must contact Mrs. Florenza or contact me if you have any questions at all about this work. Okay, and I hope you are learning your work daily. And then don't forget that you need to check the memo of activity, the activity on page 2, I think it's 252, and learn the work. Okay, right.